To order. Before we get started, let me have each of us introduce ourselves so that those who are listening online can recognize a voice as well as... Yeah, thanks for letting me know. How's that? Is that any better? Great, thanks. Welcome, everybody. I'll repeat that I'm going to ask all of us to introduce ourselves before we get started so that those who are online can recognize a voice and a face. So I'm Bobby Pestronk, the chair of the council.
Melanie White, mayor.
Cheryl Tyler, council member.
Daniel R.
Michael Lisi.
It's not on.
There, Michael Lisi still.
Roy Schaefer, treasurer.
Martha Solt, secretary.
Thanks very much. Again, welcome and Happy New Year to those who are attending in person and those who are online. I hope everyone is dug out and has water flowing and heat available and experienced no trips or falls or car accidents over the last week or so. If you wish to address the council during the public comment period, please make sure you've signed up on the sheet on the table to your left. I want to thank Julian and staff for assuring that village streets and sidewalks were cleared promptly and for following up in some particularly icy spots, especially in front of the Red House. I hope that everyone listening will talk with their building managers about using less salt in preparation for any subsequent snow or ice storms and cleaning up what salt remains after a storm. I tested creek levels for salt today, and they remain at toxic levels and have been over the past 2 weeks. Silt from the golf course still darkens the creek. If you're a member of the golf club, I'd ask you to talk with the club's property manager to assure basic and better compliance with their discharge permit. The club has been visited by county officials, and they've been advised by them that the current practice is inadequate. One resident told me, good luck with that. It's cheaper to pay the fine than it is to comply. Also, for those of you who don't get the alerts from WSSC, which provides our water and sewer services, they did issue an alert yesterday afternoon urging customers throughout Montgomery County, so including the village of Friendship Heights, to only use water for essential purposes due to a significant increase in the number of water main breaks and leaks brought on by the frigid temperatures, including many break locations that have yet to be identified. Until further notice, WSSC Water urges us to use water only as necessary, and what they mean by that is take shorter showers and quickly turn off faucets immediately after use, to limit flushing toilets, and they say do not flush after every use, and limit using washing machines and dishwashers. They continue that these actions could help the system avoid a boil water advisory and preserve water for system storage and fire protection as crews work to make repairs to breaks and leaks across a 1,000 square mile service area. According to the Monday release, WSSC Water is now responding to 63 breaks or leaks in the area, which is an increase from 47 breaks or leaks that were reported on Sunday afternoon. Our water in the village and in most areas of Montgomery County remains safe to drink or used for cooking and other normal purposes. Thanks for the holiday babka that was sent to volunteers, Ann and Dale, and thanks for another year of service to the village by our volunteers, all of them, including my fellow council members. I extend my best wishes and thanks for great work to Dale Conway, the village's assistant to program director, who will be moving and leaving the village soon. And I wish a belated happy birthday to Ann O'Neill, our program director, and in a little thing that we have going, Michigan victory at the next Maryland-Michigan athletic event. I welcome back Jason Goldstein, who may be walking around. There he is. Yep. Jason, good to see you around and up and around again after a challenging month. Welcome back. And thanks also for the new native inkberries in Humphrey Park and the removal of the Arbavita in Willoughby Park, soon to be replaced at an appropriate time with a different shrub. Lights in the Metro Rotunda at the north end of the Friendship Heights station have been brightened considerably. Those of you who use the Metro, and that's as a result of the work of the Public Safety Committee and the Business Alliance, and of course the Metro as well. It no longer looks dark and glum and dingy, and an aura of insecurity no longer exists there, and that's in addition to what they did on the exit to come out through the Whole Foods parking lot, where they changed the lighting in front of the equipment storage area too. It's no longer dim. For residents of 4701 Willard Avenue who have felt that erosion at the northeast corner of the building is worrisome, I visited the site with county officials before the holidays. They're now sorting out who has responsibility for investigation and follow-up and what might have already been reviewed. Before moving to the rest of tonight's agenda, please note two changes. One, that the Community Advisory Committee's report will be moved up under committee reports as another report from a committee, and it will be the first committee report rather than being entertained under new business. And second, Councilmember Salt has let me know that she has one item that she'd like to add under new business. And Councilwoman Salt, I don't know whether you want to tell us what that is or wait until later. Okay. With that, I'll look to any comments from the public. And Jason, thanks. We have 7 people who wish to address the council, and I suspect you all know a 3-minute time limit for that, and an alert will go off at 2.5 minutes, and then an additional alert will go off at the 3 minutes. So I'll call folks in the order of sign in. Allison Alt? Alt, yes, thank you. And if you would provide your name and address.
Hi,
Thanks.
Allison Alt, 4550 North Park, the Carlton. I would like a status update on Page Park, please. Seems to be dragging along at this point and no news. So if somebody can provide kind of what's going on, what we're expecting timeline-wise, because it's a little bit of an eyesore. It's not usable at the moment.
So I think the village manager will provide an update during his comments tonight.
Thank you.
Charles Schwartz.
My name is Charles Schwartz, and I reside at 4620 North Park Avenue. My apartment faces Page Park, and for many months I have seen the park closed as a result of the signing of an awful contract and what I believe is mismanagement of the situation surrounding the park. But Now I want to talk about the situation regarding the park as it presently exists. I'm as anxious as the village council to get the park open as soon as possible. And I want the park to be completed properly and completed in compliance with all requirements of the Americans with Disability Act. The council is pushing for the completion and filing of a form called the Maryland Accessibility Compliance Form, which by its very terms is for alteration and addition to existing commercial buildings. I emphasize existing. The Maryland Department of Permitting Services apparently considers a park for ADA purposes to come within the ambit of a commercial building. The first hurdle the council has to satisfy is that the project for Page Park is an alteration and addition. I've passed out 2 photos. The first one, marked A, is from the council's own website and shows what the park looked like before the project commenced. The photo marked B was taken from my window and shows the park in its present condition. What's the relevance of relying on the ADA compliance form? It's a term of art. If the contractor can certify that more than 20% of the cost of the alteration is providing accessible path of travel, which is a term of art, then the ADA compliance have been met. An ADA path of travel is a clear, unobstructed route that allows people to move between the accessible areas of a building or facility. The ADA requires that paths of travel be accessible to people with disabilities, including those who use wheelchairs. The contractor signed the ADA compliance for some months ago, but Montgomery County authorities said the contractor could not provide the certification. As part of that certification, the contractor used figures from the original contract to arrive at the 20% figure to show compliance. However, the contractor took all the expenses related to patio hardscape and considered all of them to be for ADA or accessibility requirements. That's clearly wrong. And what they were trying to do is use a, to get everything into one figure so that they could satisfy the 20% figure. A professional has now been hired to certify ADA compliance form. That professional should be made aware by the council of the original contract and the figures thereon in which the original form relied on. The professional should satisfy himself or herself that this is a new structure and not an alteration or addition. But even if they consider the project to be an alteration or addition, they should independently determine whether the 20% test is met and not merely act as a rubber stamp. Do I have 30 seconds? No? I just want to say, I believe that 3 minutes is totally, doesn't give people enough form to develop something which can be complex. I think it should be extended. And I think, in light of what Ms. Alt said, the council should reply to comments that night, because in a month, people are going to forget about it. I've had many comments that I've made and have never heard anything about them.
Thank you
very much.
Mr. Schwartz. Al Muller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Al Muller, 4601 North Park Avenue. And I will do what I usually do and start with something positive. Seconding the chairman's comments, the snow was removed, which otherwise could have been a dangerous thing. This is sort of taken for granted, but our staff does this. They aren't given, I think, often enough the credit for the many things they do. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for commenting on that. I also will do what I've done for the last many months because the treasurer insists that he doesn't need to do this because that's not the most important thing, and that is to let the community know how much money this village has. It's important to know because it's a positive thing. We presently have $3,650,000. That includes $97,000 for capital improvements, which would cover all the capital improvements that have been mentioned by the treasurer and that I know of personally. It would include the improvements to the Red House, the improvements for the Page Park, the improvements at different times to the streets and roads, and of course, in addition to that, $3.6 million. At the beginning of May, the village will be, thanks to Mr. Measy, getting $1 million from the developers of 4450. So those are very positive things. And despite what our treasurer has said, I've never indicated that that's all that should be reported. All I think is that the treasurer should indicate what the facts are, which presently means we are in a very, very, very good financial state. And if he wishes to give his opinion of what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's fine. But I think it's important that the village gets the positive aspects, because this is supposed to be a village of Friendship Heights, a positive emotion, not a negative one. And in that regard, I've been disappointed. I go to every meeting, whether I'm on the council or not. I've done this for 50 years. And I frequently make comments. And it's not to be critical. It's to give advice and suggestions which you don't have to follow, obviously. It is not, as the treasurer has indicated at the end of the last meeting, because I want to be on the council. I did this for 20 years when I wasn't on the council. It's not something that one does to be on the council. It's what one does to say something good about a community that I think is very special. And I thank the council, each and every one of you, including the treasurer, for working very hard. But I think there has to be a little bit more positivity towards one another and not be taking comments that we won't repeat against colleagues. And I think that has happened in the last few meetings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Patricia Canessa?
Yes, I am Patricia Canessa, 5500 Friendship Boulevard. Yes, I have chaired the Climate Control Committee for a period practically of a year, and it's not something that is not very clear at this point, the significance of fires and wildfires. And the effect of the climate that we have at this point that is in many ways unpredictable, as well as many ways deteriorating and creating opportunities for a similar disaster to happen in any place of the United States. We have also looked into the increase of winds in the area, and the dryness of the area in which we are situated at this point is one of the driest points in the all eastern coast of the United States. So that opens certainly to the possibility of having any kind of accident and a magnanimous tragedy with all the buildings that we have around. I think that with a lot of motivation, this committee will continue working in those small projects that can enhance the whole opportunity for having a maintenance of the structures as well as protecting people. But we are talking about a magnanimous project that in reality this council needs to look into other funding. You need to be prepared in reality to confront the possibility of a tragedy here and how we are going to manage that tragedy. At this point, we are working into doing an educational component with the residents and finding out the possibility of these people to save their lives, but that is far more than that. We have contacted many times the firefighters. I have gone personally to the firefighters station many times. They are not prepared for an outside fire. They are very much prepared for an inside fire, you know. So in reality, the resources, the skills are not there, and should be a conjoint plan between our own structures within Friendship Heights and certainly the auxiliary structures that are provided by the firefighters the police, and many other of the alert systems that we have in the community in order to improve the possibilities of having a successful protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Cocchetti?
I'm Roger Cocchetti, 5500 Friendship Boulevard. 3 quick comments. First, on the procedural issue that was raised earlier, I think the council would be far better off if it not only allowed but strongly encouraged written testimony before the meetings. It saves everyone time. It gives council members the opportunity to read the testimony at their leisure and offers witnesses the opportunity to speak for longer than 3 minutes. So there's no publicized procedure for it now, and I think it should not only be publicized but encouraged. 2 small points, or 1 small point, 1 cosmic point. On the snow cleanup, the village has done a spectacular job, but there is a small lingering problem somebody should be looking into, and it's not just within the village but nearby as well, and that is that little strip that's on the street but off the sidewalk often has large piles of snow accumulated. The people who are shoveling the sidewalk don't do the street, and the snow trucks, the snow plows who are doing the street don't cover that little strip, and I saw numerous people in this last snowstorm stuck at that point. So this may be something to take up with the county, but nonetheless it is an important small point. The larger point I wanted to raise has to do with the larger sort of long-term financial outlook. You can't not be struck by the $3 billion deficit the state government is facing, and the fact that pressure will be on lots of spending areas, one of which will eventually be the subsidy or the revenue sharing that is structured with communities like ours. And I wanted to throw out a cosmic idea that somebody should be looking at over the long term. It's complicated and requires lots of legal changes, but the possibility of expanding the boundaries of the village to include Somerset and the apartment house across Willard Avenue. This would bring in it would increase the population of the village, thereby bringing in a larger revenue stream without any additional expenses, none. It would require an act of the state legislature, obviously, but it had the side benefit of making Friendship Heights once again, according to the Census Bureau, the most populated place in the United States. We're now number 2, and it would also put us on the path to one of the 20 most populated places in the world if we absorbed Somerset House and the Friendship Heights, or the Friendship apartment house. So those are my suggestions. The last one takes a lot of study and thorough examination, but there's no cost and only revenue by expanding our boundaries to include them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Really?
Paul Brown? That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and council members, Julian and Jason. Happy New Year to you all. Like Mr. Cicchetti, I have 3 points that are somewhat related, a little bit different. First of all, just for kind of public awareness, and I don't know if there's something that the village can do to highlight this fact in the newsletter, but in October, new regulations took effect that will affect all of the renters in the village, and more than half the residents are renters. This is the rent stabilization law in Montgomery County, which limits how much landlords can raise rent. It also puts limits on what they can charge for fees, which is something that a lot of landlords have seen as a revenue enhancing area. So just note that. Second, on the budget, I just want to commend the village treasurer. I think he's being very prudent about budget planning, and I appreciate that as a taxpayer very much. It's exactly what needs to be done. I've heard concerns on both sides from residents about, well, maybe we could just raise tax. Other folks are just like, no, we shouldn't raise tax. I guess raising taxes should always be a last option. And the council hopefully can prioritize looking at spending. Maybe there are areas that can be saved, or potential revenue in other areas that can be raised. Last point is on the Friendship Heights sector plan, and thank you to the chairman and the council for the great briefing that we had from the county. That was very helpful. In that regard, I'd just like to associate myself with comments that Mr. Moody made last fall regarding the benefits of additional investment and development can bring, rather than sometimes seeing that development as a negative or extractive, which is a term I think you used and which is a good term. The village has really evolved dramatically since it was founded, right? It was a village of houses. Now it's a village of high-rises. And I don't think any of us should presume that its present shape should be frozen in time forever. It's evolving. It may evolve in different ways. But let's, I think it's good to look how it can evolve to maximize the benefit for everyone and continue to bring in those resources that we depend on for the services in the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. I have a few things I'd like to suggest. Following on Al Muller's comments on positivity, I want to try to emphasize some positive things here. Number one, not particularly a positive thing, but I want to thank the chairman for doing the salt testing. I do the same salt testing that he does. He does it in Willard Avenue Park. I do it behind 4615 down in the creek next to the Somerset Pool. And on that issue, I would encourage the council to ask the village manager to work with building owners, in particular 5550 on Friendship Boulevard, on minimizing the amount of salt consistent with safety, but minimizing the amount of salt. The sidewalks along both sides of 5550 are full of salt, and it's a problem. And frankly, it isn't in their interest to do it. They're just wasting money by putting that salt. Smaller amounts of salt are just as effective as large amounts and don't have the impact on the creeks, which are significant. As I'm sure the chairman is aware, these creeks are reach levels of salt that are real problems and can kill freshwater organisms in the creek. So I hope you can work with that. On the honesty, the transparency that this council, some of the members of this council ran on, I think there's been some lack. I think that we are not getting information on Page Park, both on the website and from the council member at these meetings, and I think that's a real problem. This park has now been essentially 3.5 years and counting. There's no action. We don't know what's going on. There's nothing on the website that is current to my knowledge, and I would encourage you that it's really important to provide taxpayers with information about that. And to that end, I think Roger Cassetti mentioned the state deficit. That deficit is going to flow down to this council, to this village. It's a huge deficit, and this council needs to anticipate that problem. And I encourage you to do that. And one of the ways to do that is spend smarter, not less necessarily, but smarter.
Thank you. Those are the only people that signed up. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council? Seeing none, comments from council members? Anyone? Okay, start here with Ms. Tyler.
Dan and Roger, thank you for bringing up the $3 billion. I couldn't remember, when is that going to kick in? Was there a date given exactly when it's going to start? Now?
This year and next.
I knew it's next year. So now they're starting, okay.
Yeah, now.
Thank you.
Member Salt? Yes.
I'm going to be probably the umpteenth person mentioning salt. Our Environment Committee worked on raising awareness on the actual amount of salt needed around buildings. I mean, I've noticed that it's better, but it's way, way, way too much salt used in our community. Dan mentioned around 5,500. I noticed around Willoughby, huge, huge clumps of salt. And also, salt was distributed after it was determined there wasn't supposed to be any more snow or freezing. So it was completely unnecessary. So it is something I think we as a community need to work together to keep reminding, maybe even as residents of buildings, remind people working there. Of course, the village manager has communicated this message, but I think human behavior is hard to change, so we just have to keep as persistently as we can working on this. But thank everybody who's aware of it and helps with this.
Thank you. Other comments from the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to the mayor's announcements. Mayor White.
Thank you. All residents are invited to join us for our annual Winter Festival community event on Saturday, February 8th at 10:30 a.m. here at the Village Center. Check next month's newsletter for more information.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the December 9th council meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Councilman Measy. Is there support?
So I second it.
Okay, supported by Councilmember Solt. Are there any questions, any comment on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay.
R.
Yes.
R4, Measy. Measy 4, Schaefer.
4.
Schaefer 4, Sold 4, Tyler. Tyler 4, White.
Yes.
White 4, Pestrunk.
Yes.
Pestrunk 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Moves us on to the treasurer's report. Councilmember Schaefer.
Thank you. First, I want to respond to some of the comments made by people who are here. First, I appreciate Al showing up at committee meetings. I think it's very admirable. I wish more residents would show up at our meetings, but I understand if they're not able. Number two, I wanted to thank Roger for pointing out the need to take a short-term and long-term view of our finances. It's something I talk about constantly. It's why this year in the budget we are going to go 2 years out for operating and capital expenses. We've never before gone out more than 1 year. My goal is to get to 4 years out beyond the immediate budget year, and we'll get there. And the third thing regarding the pending deficits, it's pretty widely known. It's not only a state issue, it's a county issue. I think 2 months ago I talked about the county executive who had made very public comments about how there's a very strong possibility that the county is going to have to cut programs and also possibly raise taxes. So it's correct, that will flow down to us. We don't live here in our own vacuum. We had a finance committee meeting last Thursday, which will serve as my monthly report. I'm going to defer my comments on the committee meeting until we reach that part of the agenda. And now I need to address statements made by Chairman Pestrunk at the December council meeting and again at the Thursday Finance Committee meeting. And I'm going to thank you in advance for your time. His statements focused on actions taken while acquiring CDs for the village after funds became available from maturing CDs. He accused me of failing to follow proper procedures, misusing my position, and acting without authority while mentioning concerns about embezzlement. As a certified public accountant, as a fiduciary charged with protecting village assets, and as a federal employee responsible for obligating government funds, I reject these allegations and must respond. In a working career of over 40 years, I have never, not once, been accused of any impropriety until last month and again last week by the chairman. Let me share some background. On December 12, 2022, the previous council unanimously agreed to establish a CD account for the village. Since its inception, the account has only held cash and CDs. This council authorized the mayor and treasurer and the chairman as signers. Chairman Pestronk was not comfortable with the signature form and refused to sign. Neither the mayor nor I shared Chairman Pestronk's concerns and now serve as signers. Before the mayor signed, she reviewed the signature form with the village attorney and received his okay. After not accepting signing authority, Chairman Pestronk wanted to close out the CD account. At the December 2024 council meeting, as noted in the transcript, Chairman Pestronk referred to multiple conversations at Finance Committee and council meetings where discussions occurred about terminating the account. Those were not conversations. Those were monologues. I cannot find a mention of any other council member sharing the chairman's concerns. Chairman Pestronk also stated about maturing CDs, and this is a quote from the December transcript. The understanding was the CDs would not go back and be reinvested in a CD with the same paperwork. Instead, they would be invested in a Maryland state fund. In other words, the chairman is claiming we agreed not to roll over the CDs. Instead, we were going to pull out the funds as CDs matured and put them in a Maryland fund until the CD account was zero. That statement is false. Only a council vote can terminate the CD account, just like a council vote was required to create the account. No council member, including the chairman, ever made a motion to close the CD account or transfer funds as the CDs matured, because there never was an understanding to do that. Regarding the chairman's favorite investment, the Maryland Fund, as I discussed last month, the Maryland funds are not federally insured like CDs are, so there is a higher risk with the Maryland funds, and right now, the Maryland funds pay a lower interest rate than CDs. So if we followed the chairman's advice today, we would have higher risk and a lower return on these funds. Now I would like to address the specific accusations. Did I fail to follow proper procedures? No. The chairman said he did not think proper procedures were used. The council does not have established procedures for the CD account. So when the chairman said that decisions about CDs were supposed to require 2 signatures, that statement is false. If the chairman was referring to accepted financial procedures, that statement is also false. Proper financial procedures include requirements like generating an audit trail, having separation of duties, and timely reporting. We do all of those things. As I will show, we have an extensive audit trail generated in real time, and all parties receive documentation during the process. The chairman said there should be 2 approvals to deposit funds into a CD. Because the funds never leave the account, it is common to allow one person to make decisions to deposit funds into a particular CD. In fact, the prior council delegated this decision to the staff. For the other allegations, did I misuse my position or act without authority or the mayor's knowledge? No. And I have the documentation to prove it. I have the emails here. I'm going to walk you through the emails generated from the CD we acquired immediately prior to the December council meeting. You will see that Mayor White was aware of all the actions I took and agreed with those actions. Our investment advisor is Brian Kuski. Mr. Kuski is an accredited investment fiduciary. That is a professional certification. On September 12, 2024, Mr. Kuski sent an email to myself and the village manager and the mayor. Mr. Kuski wrote, Roy, Melanie, Julian, I wanted to follow up on the CD options. Let me know your thoughts. He wrote that because we had funds available from a matured CD. So you see, the mayor was aware from the start, the same time I was. As signers, Mayor White and I have equal authority to individually execute decisions within this account. Acting on her own, Mayor White could have authorized a rollover into a new CD. On September 22nd, in the interest of collaboration, I sent an email to Mayor White. I wrote, "Melanie, we had a couple of CDs that expired, and we need to roll over the cash into new ones. Are you okay if I talk to Brian and go with his recommendations? The funds will remain in the same account. Thanks, Roy." The next day, Mayor White responded to me, "Thank you, Roy. Yes, this seems like a good plan." So Chairman Pestrunk's claims that I acted without the mayor's knowledge or authority are false. Mayor White and I coordinated and agreed on a plan. She did not recommend any other course of action. Mayor White never said, "Wait a minute, Roy, we have an understanding not to roll over these CDs and instead put the money in the Maryland Fund." Remember, that is the understanding the chairman said we had, and I was violating. The reason Mayor White never suggested moving money into the Maryland Fund was because there was no understanding. The next day, acting with Mayor White's agreement, I called Mr. Kuski and accepted his recommendations for the rollover CD. Those conversations are recorded. Later the same day, Mr. Kuski sent an email to me and the mayor memorializing the action. The transaction, and we discussed this last month, also appears on a monthly statement. Those statements go directly to village staff, not to me. 3 village staff have access to those statements, and any council member has the right to view them. Our account balances are verified by our independent auditor. That's a lot of detail, but it's important I mention all the steps we take and who is included, because last month, the chairman intentionally mentioned concerns about embezzlement while criticizing my actions. For someone in my position, that is a trigger word. Even a baseless accusation could have serious repercussions for me with my license and my federal job. So that is the process and my role in it. From the beginning, the mayor was aware of and agreed to all the steps we took. There is an extensive real-time audit trail. There was proper documentation, proper recording, and the account balances are audited. If the chairman had chosen to address his concerns to me privately, I could have discussed this with him one-on-one. Because he chose to make his accusations in public, I must give this public response, and that is unfortunate. I have one last comment for the chairman. Chairman Pestrunk, if you want to refute anything I said, show proof. Do not refer to imaginary conversations or understandings that only you can recall. And I have one last comment for everyone listening. I am proud to be the treasurer for Friendship Heights. It's an honor to have this chair, and I'm proud of the work I've done. My CPA license, my fiduciary responsibilities, and my livelihood require me to uphold proper financial principles. And I would never put anyone's reputation or career at risk by making baseless, unprovable claims. Thank you.
Thank you. Is your report finished, Councilman Schaefer?
My report is going to be the Finance Committee, what happened at the committee meeting.
But this, I understand that you had an opportunity to give a treasurer's report, and I'm asking you whether that, under this section of the agenda, is
Yes.
finished. Thank you. Are there any comments? Any member of the council wish to make a comment on the report?
I appreciate hearing this, and quite frankly, I think it's sad that we all have to listen to this. It's not becoming of the council.
Are there any other comments? Yes, Councilman Mazie.
I simply wanted to say that.
Can you speak up, Mike?
I simply wanted to say that I think a molehill has been made into a mountain here. I, for one, as a member of the Finance Committee, have never had any reason to remotely question the treasurer's honesty. There's never been a question of money being embezzled. I never heard that, but my hearing is not as good as it used to be, so perhaps it was said. But there's, I have complete faith in the treasurer and his honesty. I think there's been a misunderstanding between the chair and the treasurer, and they should be able to work this out. I think a lot's being made out of very little here.
Thank you. Are there other comments? I'd like to offer some comments about the handling of the village's investments. One council member characterizes it as none of my business since I didn't sign a contract. Another has joked about it as a rehash of an old issue. Perhaps some might see it as personal bickering. It's been said that nobody is really interested in this issue anyway. But I think of it in 4 ways: as a question of fiduciary responsibility, a serious policy issue, a question of procedures addressing document signing, and finally, an issue of trust. The fiduciary responsibility to manage the village's financial and investment affairs is a fundamental and primary responsibility of the council. Whether anyone else takes interest is besides the point. They will take interest if there is a problem. Any fog over our responsibility will then become clear. I didn't sign the agreement with Mr. Kuski's company because I viewed that step as exercising my fiduciary responsibility. How we invest over $3 million is a serious policy issue. Different investment options, all specified by Maryland law, are possible. They do involve trade-offs of risk and reward, as any investment does. So we should enter these investments with our eyes open, transparently, and collectively. The charter speaks to the responsibility of the chairman, treasurer, and council with regard to the receipt and dispersal of funds. Assuring that contracts signed by village officials, elected or hired, are accurate as to content and form is an essential practice for village officials, if for no other reason than to protect the interest of the village corporation and its residents. Careful review by those asked to sign contracts and by our attorney is important. There are errors of content in the form signed by previous appointed and currently elected officials. One error is potentially fatal, authorizing disallowable investments regardless of whether that happens or not, if it does happen. Finally, trust among council members is the grease that creates comedy, and I mean C-O-M-I-T-Y, rather than tragicomedy. Good and lasting relationships rather than drama and bad faith. Comedy is possible even when there are differences of opinion about policy, procedure, goals, and contract content. On the issue of managing the financial affairs of the village, I have privately and publicly complimented the treasurer and chairman of the finance committee on several practices he has introduced into the budget process, and which the finance committee and council have supported, sometimes in modified form. But on investment policy, we differ. I have discussed this with him over the past year, privately and publicly in committee and council meetings. On the issue of contracts and their form and content, I have been a strong proponent of careful review, legal consultation, and a change in village practice to assure review and legal consultation. Since being elected, I've worked closely with the village manager to make this a consistent village practice. I've argued and disagreed with him, but we have typically taken the time to understand each other's opinions and, making good use of our differences, arrived at a productive working relationship and better outcomes for the village. In this case, regarding the CD agreement, the certificate of deposit agreement contains factual errors, as I've noted before. They should have been corrected before anyone signed the agreement. Whether it would have required more work of Mr. Kuski is irrelevant. Whether we would have to find another contractor was irrelevant. I pointed these out as the Finance Committee and Council worked on these investments. I didn't sign the agreement because of them. Demurring on signature doesn't relieve me of my fiduciary responsibility as a council member. I believe it displays it. Signing contracts with questionable content defaults on that responsibility. On the issue of trust, last April, when the Finance Committee and Council were discussing the reauthorizations for the CD investments and finally making them, Council Member Schaefer agreed that the Finance Committee should usually be part of these decisions when village CDs matured, with an implication that in the transfers being made to the MLGIP, which is the Maryland Fund, at that time there was not need to do so because the council had authorized them. That's true. But future notice by implication would become an opportunity to move the final CDs out of the Kuski arrangement into the Maryland Local Government Investment Pool, one of the allowable investments established under Maryland law, or into some other investment vehicle. My questions at the last council meeting were based on that prior understanding. Council member and conversations, Council Member Schaefer failed to do that either by discussing the maturing CDs with the Finance Committee, members privately, or calling a Finance Committee meeting to do so, both of which would have been easy enough to do. Since I'm not sure whether it will be mentioned in the report on the Finance Committee held last week, members again agreed that as the current 3 CDs penned maturation or, in fact, mature, the Finance Committee chair and or the village manager will alert committee members so that a decision can be made about the disposition of funds. We agreed that this would set aside past differences and look to the future rather than the past problems. Removing the funds now invested in the 3 CDs will invoke a financial penalty. None, or only some of the 7 of us may be here when those CDs mature. I'm hoping that whomever is elected in May will remember the principles I've referenced, examine the options available for investments at that time, and make policy, procedure, and trust important aspects of their governmental practice and decision-making. At the end of our discussion at the last council meeting, I said, quote, I'm not suggesting impropriety. I say it again clearly here. I am not and did not suggest impropriety. I'm referencing issues of fiduciary responsibility, policy, trust, and process. And as a tiny footnote right now, the interest rates from the Maryland Local Government Investment Pool are actually higher than CD rates right now. Thank you for allowing me to make these comments. Are there any other comments from council members? Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so I'd like to, I might not have caught all of that, but I'd like to respond. One is I never criticized the chairman for not signing. That's his right, and I would agree he shouldn't sign if he has a problem with it. But again, I signed and the mayor, after conferring with our village attorney, signed. We did not share his concerns, and neither did the signers from the prior council. Two, as I said, a discussion is not an agreement. Talking about something doesn't mean we had an understanding or agreed on a course of action. The questions that Chairman Pestrant refers to, those were not questions. Those were accusations. Those were statements, and the accusations I accused him of come directly from the chairman, from the transcript of the meeting. I did agree, and I acknowledged, to alert Finance Committee members when CDs are expiring. That is a courtesy notice. We're not changing how we roll over CDs. I'm going to continue to work with Mayor White, who is the other signer on the account. So, I'm not sure what I was referring to in this last note, but concerns while discussing actions, I'm not even sure what he's referring to. But again, if there's going to be criticism of me or my actions, I'd like to see the source of what the chairman is claiming I said or what we agreed to, because without it, it's simply not credible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Schaefer. Let's move on then to the village manager's report.
Page Park, we have 3 items that we are working on concurrently, more or less. that have been required by the county from the prior inspection. One is engaging an architect to take additional measurements and verify the slope of the pathway and to confirm the compliance of ADA throughout the park project. That is in progress. We hired an architect. We had a meeting with the architect on site just before the holidays. He has begun his work, and we hope to have that portion completed pretty shortly. The second item is 3 third-party inspections required by the county for the footers, the anchor bolts, and the concrete slabs. We are in the process of identifying a firm to be able to do this. We have a recommended firm that we are following up and doing some checking to make sure that they are qualified to do this work. They have submitted a preliminary proposal, so we hope to have that lined up shortly. And the third item is the stormwater management plan, also required by the county, but I emphasize that this one does not relate to the opening of the park. The first 2 items have to be completed before the park can open, but the stormwater management plan and concept does not relate to the opening of the park, but has to be done at the same time. So that work has just begun with our civil engineering firm after the council approved that contract. So that work is underway this month and will probably take several months, but again, that does not relate to the timing for opening the park. I just want to add that the Page Park fence has been completely replaced after having been damaged multiple times, and now the fence circles the entire park. It had been open in the back and on the side, and we do want to remind everyone that the fence is still there and the park still has to be closed. We're going to put up some additional signage. There had been some signs on the previous fence that we're going to revise and put back on this new fence very shortly. We're also going to have an update in next month's newsletter with everything I've just said, plus more details as they come in between now and the first of the month, and we will update our website as well. One other item is some concerns have been expressed to us about the 5500 Wisconsin utility work in preparation for the development of this apartment building on the site. They are relocating utilities and they're going to be burying the overhead lines and putting them underground. That work has started, and it's already generated some questions and concerns because of the closing of the sidewalk and blocking pedestrians, and also closing some lanes of Wisconsin Avenue without much notice or some type of schedule. So we are following up with Pepco, who's doing the utility work, and we will follow up with the developer as well, Donahoe, to try to get some clarification on the schedule for this work and when it is expected to be completed. The construction work is expected to begin sometime this year. Not sure of that either, but we will follow up and notify the community as soon as we have some more details on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the village manager? Yes.
Just one question, Julian. Can you confirm, so the 3 inspections, we're looking to have a single performer conduct all 3 of those inspections, right?
Yes.
One house that has the
Yes.
expertise to do all 3 of those?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Salt.
You mentioned, and I think it was in the Friday memo, that the architect had measured and the slope of, I guess we call it the path.
Yes.
What was that measurement?
We don't know.
But the architect knows.
The architect knows. Yeah, he has to note it on the drawings, and then he has to submit the ADA compliance form.
So, so far, the drawing with the slope measurement has not been submitted to?
Correct.
Okay. And this, my last question is, you said on 5500, construction will commence sometime in 2025. Does that mean they have a permit?
No, they don't have a building permit yet, and that the building permit triggers the $1 million transfer to us, as noted previously, but that is not expected before May, which is actually the deadline when it has to be transferred to us by. So they're not anticipating getting a building permit prior to May 3rd, I believe, is the deadline.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
So that, the ADA compliance form and the other information, how, do we know how we're submitting that to the county?
The The architect will submit it with our contractor through the county portal where all the documents get uploaded, the same way that the permit process was done.
Okay, but I know we've had issues, things getting submitted. Is it clear if it's the architect or the green sweep who's actually making the submission?
It should be the architect directly. But
So he has access to the portal?
He will, yes.
He will, okay. And, okay, the other, I remember the last information we had on the 5500. They were expecting a completion date of very late 2027, I think December. Do you know if that's changed?
We don't know if anything has changed. Yeah, we have to connect with them to see if there's a revised schedule. But that was the latest information we had previously was, yeah, late 2027 completion of the whole project.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Macy?
On the 5500s, probably useful to clarify that, it's probably useful to clarify that on the building permit is a fairly routine thing. The big issue was the site plan, and once they got their site plan approved, then the building permit becomes is a matter of course. The other part is has been mentioned is that while our contract with 5500, the people there says that we get the $1 million when they get their building permit. There is a date there. If they don't get their building permit by May 1st, we still get the money at that point. So our attorney, the late Norman Knopf, wrote that provision into the agreement clearly because of his experience with contractors and the promises they make. So he wrote in that provision. We're grateful for that. So we will get the money whether they get their building permit or not, and they should be able to get the permit. Finally, in terms of the disruption on Wisconsin Avenue, I want just to recall to the residents and to the council that when the previous council was sort of delaying for some period of time the building of 5500 and making appeals to the planning board, we recognized as well that there would be great disruption to the residents of Friendship Heights. If people are concerned about what's happening on Wisconsin Avenue, wait until South Park Avenue is closed off, virtually closed off, as they begin the building. Wait till the Hills Plaza, I'm sorry, down the street here is virtually closed off. The village is going to be in for a 2 to 3 year tremendous inconvenience for people who walk and drive their cars as this project goes forward. Now, that was not sufficient to stop the project, but we tried to alert the residents that this building maybe in the long term will be fine for the village. It will increase the tax base of the village, as Mr. Cochetti suggests, and it will have great benefits. But in the short term, there are going to be problems and inconveniences. So we were not simply dragging our feet just because we wanted to be difficult. We were trying to get the best arrangement possible for the residents as we knew this building was going to go up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. The report on the Personnel Committee meetings of December 16th and January 6th. Mayor White.
Thank you.
Chairman, I thought you were going to put the CAC first.
You are absolutely
Okay.
correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let's do that then. Mr. Butcher, thank you.
Good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. Dan Dozier just alerted me that they've lifted the water alert. He's got a text.
There's a press release from WSSC saying that as of 6:30 tonight, due in part because of the public's waters conservation efforts, WSSC Water has lifted the essential water use only request of as of 6:30 p.m. today for all 1.9 million residents or customers in Prince George's and Montgomery counties. So the water
Mr.
restrictions
Dozier,
are gone.
thank you very much for your report and also for keeping it under 3 minutes. Yeah. Mr. Bucher?
As long as you
Abs-
want.
And with whomever you'd like. Yeah.
So again, good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. I'm in front of you as the chair of the Community Advisory Committee. And you already have this in your packets, I believe. So I'm going to just kind of do a summarized version, and if there are questions afterwards. But I thought a little bit more extensive discussion, given residents' presence, might be worthwhile. For the last 6 or 7 months, the committee, and this is verified in the minutes that you get after all of our meetings, has been studying this development issue related to the sector plan. And we have been exploring the idea of amenities to kind of meet the needs of the village. We've done that a number of different ways. We have attended every single county sector plan meeting. Myself and Cameron Moody are members of the Friendship Heights Alliance and attend all of those meetings, or as many as we possibly can. So we get incremental presentations about development in the area. So we think we've got a pretty good sense of what's going on. And the 2 most recent meetings in Wisconsin Place and the online Zoom meeting kind of confirmed a lot of the points that we wanted to talk about. This is not meant to be all-inclusive, but suggestions or recommendations from the committee to council to explore as part of the development plan. Our primary goal was to create a vibrant, inclusive, and safe community by addressing key infrastructure and social needs. The plan outlines initiatives aimed at improving public amenities, safety, environmental consciousness, and community engagement, fostering a close-knit village atmosphere while promoting growth and development. Depending on the amenity, the plan outlines historical needs, so we've done research in terms of past sector plan initiatives, benefits, potential locations, broad economic considerations, and alternative uses. We were pleased that several of these ideas were also brought up in the recent planning sessions held by the county. I also want to note that this is a consensus document by the committee, which is why it took us 6 or 7 months to develop. The key components are a county library branch and arts center that would be integrated into one building. This will serve as a cultural and creative hub, fostering artistic expression, collaboration, and community engagement. We see a county library branch critical, inclusive of all the technological and educational resources that can be offered. The nearest existing public libraries, which is mind-boggling to me considering the density of population and the education level in this village, are 3 in Bethesda, 1 on Massachusetts Avenue, and 1 in Chevy Chase on Connecticut Avenue. None of them serve an area as densely populated as this. This would be of great appeal to a community with one of the highest concentrations of seniors also who value reading and need walkability since many are unable to drive. Additionally, in the expanded space, a range of art classes from visual arts to performing arts would engage youth and adults. Special programs would highlight local artisans, music, theater, and cultural events, and in a way replace the AMC theater that was lost. That keeps coming up over and over again. This would also free up critical space in the village center, so the village center can focus on constituent services and management services. Play and park space areas to provide safe, fun, and well-maintained play and sports areas for children and young families, promoting physical activity and social interaction. We recommend enhancement of the park that can be made accessible by foot and vehicle paths. The space could also be used for outdoor entertainment, expositions, fairs, like are commonly done over at Wisconsin Place and the collection plazas. The need for a dog park is immediate. There are many residents with dogs in the village and surrounding area. There is no dog park within easy walking distance of Friendship Heights or the surrounding communities. Currently, other than the streets and small parks, many dog owners use the Geico property to walk their dogs. Dogs provide another means of open space that can be used for neighbors of common interest to meet and socialize. In every planning session to date held by the county and the Friendship Heights Alliance, appreciation, concern, and discussion regarding walkability, street lighting, and the unsightly presence of utility connections which impact the visual presence of the area are raised. These suggestions follow, and while likely part of a development plan, we feel that it's important that these be documented. Pedestrian-friendly street amendments to make the street safer and more accessible for pedestrians, cyclists, and all modes of sustainable transportation to reduce traffic congestion and promote walkability. Other benefits and other details are in your packet. Environmental lighting, enhance public safety and visibility at night by installing energy-efficient, environmentally friendly lighting throughout the greater community. Lighting is often mentioned in many, many meetings as being inadequate, too dim in the evening, creating a safety concern. This is especially true on Willard Avenue and sections of the Village of Friendship Heights at intersections, which also impacts walkability. Also, taking all utility lines and moving them underground to improve the aesthetics, reliability, and safety in the community. That's a summary of the 6 pages that you have. Hopefully that's adequate. If there are questions on the packet as you've received them, I'll try and address them. And certainly any and all of you are welcome to the community meetings. They're open to the public.
Thanks very much,
Yep.
Mr. Butcher, for
Sure.
this very comprehensive report and for the length of time that I know it took to shepherd this through the consensus process.
Yep.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure other council members appreciate it too.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see whether there are comments or questions for Mr. Butcher. So, Council Member Tyler?
As the liaison to the CAC, I first would like to commend each of you who are members and representatives of the CAC. And I really want to commend Joe. I talk about you a great deal and your skill sets to the rest of the council, but I want to do it in public. I think you're an excellent leader. I think you have kept the people on task, and you have kept them on a mission that they obviously are very determined and have the foresight to want to push forward for this community. Joe says it in a very calm way of how things have proceeded in these last 6 months. They have worked very hard. I am not there to judge what they do, how they do something. I'm there to listen and to see if I can offer any other comments or suggestions or things for them to think of. Every now and then I do bring something to them. But this is a very dedicated group of people who some have lived here a very long time and some who have lived here a long time. But they are all very concerned about their community. And I've learned a lot with them. I've watched how each of them have grown in different ways also by listening to each other. I just commend you all, each of you, for the dedication and the work that you've done to get to this point, even though Montgomery County Planning doesn't want a full report like they've always done. They want individuality, but you guys have taken the steps to even break it down to the individuality in the group with representatives from each of those buildings obtaining information from the residents of each of those buildings, whether they're rental or whether they're residential condominiums. And I want to thank you, and it's been great working with you. I'm still there, we're still here, but I just wanted to make that comment, and I thank each of you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, I've attended many CAC meetings, and I wanted to thank you for your many years, and it's very impressive watching you run those meetings, because you have not only a large group of people, but very different personalities, and it's watching you keep order and include everyone. It's very impressive. And the other thing, reading this report, I think I really appreciated that you considered the needs of all the demographics we have and all of the constituencies. So I did take note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Salt.
I think this report was truly outstanding, and I also commend you. The breadth of it, and you can tell how thoughtful these recommendations are. I have a a couple of questions.
Sure.
I have to admit, when I first read it, I thought it said many of the dogs are senior citizens, but now that many of the dog owners are senior citizens.
It's probably
so-
my typing.
No. It's just, I'm like, what? Okay. But my question is,
Mhm.
presuming this unfolds as you recommend,
Mhm.
do you see sort of the locus of our community moving over sort of across Willard Avenue and not, I kind of think of the village center and this area kind of being the locus of the community. Do you see it moving over there?
No.
Like with the library
Yeah.
and all these other things? Just a question.
Yeah, I mean, the idea here is where is the most available usable space, and we all know where that is, right? The challenge is that in attending all these meetings, and I think Cameron will attest, the county has a vision, but the coordination between the Montgomery County and the state of Maryland and the DC side is increasing every day, and the DC side is actually ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the Lord and Taylor site, you've got the Geico site, you have all these sites that are available. So you need to think about this not so much as just the village, but you need to think about this as the broader area, okay, or a regional approach to a degree. Because there's going to be benefit to both village residents and folks on the other side of Western Ave. Some might criticize that point of view because it's not village-centric. I tend to be more of a regional person, and the reality is anything that you can do to increase traffic flow and make this a destination for people to take advantage of the restaurants and the bars and everything else we have to offer here is a benefit to that Wisconsin Avenue corridor. The other thing is there's this challenge as a public space when the village offers great events. We don't advertise them. We don't promote the village, right? And the challenge is, why not? Well, we don't have enough of physical space. If we were to advertise something and 500 people came, we couldn't fit them here and we can't fit them outside, right? But if we had a space to do that, that would, of course, allow the village to come forward as a place of, we talk about medical care and stuff like that, but there's a lot of art here. And it's a differentiating feature. So there's multiple ways to think about it, and it's something I think that the development committee and the council need to take on as part of a strategic plan. Does that answer your question? Kinda? I don't know.
Not really. But,
Okay, well,
and I'm not judging
Yeah.
one way that one's good or one's bad. I
Yeah.
was just curious about what you thought where most people would be. But my second question relates to the lighting. I've not heard the term environmental lighting before. Could you explain what that means? and
LEDs.
How this dimming thing would work?
So that needs to be investigated, but there are lighting systems that are available that can offer variable lighting based on times of day, based on traffic patterns, uses a lot of solar technology. You all know that I was the treasurer of a master association down in Florida. I am now a Maryland voting resident, and I have a driver's license.
Congratulations.
And
Welcome to Maryland.
Yeah, I guess I'm a Marylander, is that what they call it? And what we put in place there is because we also have dark spots, is depending upon the time of day, and at very, very low cost, you can have lighting that will vary based on the ambient light as well as traffic patterns and duration and things like that.
I wasn't aware of that. Is there a community that has this that I could go take a look that you know?
We'd probably have to look it up, and I'm sure the developers
Okay,
know what they
fair
are.
enough. Thank you
You're
very
not going to
much.
fly to
And
Naples,
again,
Florida.
Quite a good report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Bucher? I'm sure that in addition to making this report, you would like the village council to do something with this report.
That's why we did it.
So what I'd like to recommend to the council is that this report get referred to the development committee, whose charter addresses these kinds of issues, so that the report and its contents and its use by the village in one form or another can be discussed. Would there be any objection to that? Seeing none, then the consensus of the council is not only to thank you for the report, but to refer it to the development committee.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now we're on to a report on the Personnel Committee.
Chairman,
Yes,
could we take a quick break, please?
yes, we could. So we'll take 5 minutes? Okay. It's 8:20. We'll reconvene at 8:25. Thanks. Personnel Committee, okay. We've got a report from the Personnel Committee on the meetings of December 16th and January 6th.
Thank you. So the Personnel Committee met on December 16th, along with Joshua Hutton, who was the person behind the compensation study. He made a number of recommendations, and at that meeting, Joshua answered questions from council members and residents. And he reviewed his methodology, how he came up with the recommendations that he made, how he came up with the salary recommendations, the benefits study, and it was decided at that December 16th meeting to meet again on January 6th to start going down the laundry list of his recommendations. So January 6th, we met again, and we started with his recommendations, including a 6-part sort of a tiered framework or matrix for where each individual staff member falls regarding their salaries. And in the past, we have tried to fit each staff member into a very complex chart based roughly on what the federal government does. And as you can imagine, that got a little bit too complicated. Our staff doesn't always fit neatly into any one category. So the general consensus of the Personnel Committee was to accept and work with the 6-part framework that Joshua Hutton created. However, that does not automatically include his salary recommendations. And he has made a number of recommendations for individual salaries to bring them up to what he feels is a competitive level, so that if we were to hire a replacement for that village council, for that village staff member, that we would be able to attract the best, most qualified individuals that we can. And also, we touched briefly on village staff benefits. We made a decision at the January 6th meeting to continue this complex conversation at a future Personnel Committee meeting. And there will be meetings coming up where we look at individual salaries and also individual performance reviews. So it's a process, we're moving on it, but that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Questions for Mayor White from council members? Yes.
I understand you said the committee's going to look at these and discussing. Do you have a deadline or a time frame you're working in, or is this just going off to infinity?
We are aware that the budget is fast approaching, and I think our goal is to mesh the salary study with the budget.
Other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the report from the Parks and Grounds Committee meeting of January 7th. We had 2 residents who attended the meeting to make comments. So parenthetically, I'd say those who wish to address council members or council committees where the task of the committee is known are certainly free to attend those meetings as well. There's certainly more flexibility in the smaller group to interact with the folks who attend, with committee members. One resident talked with us about the damage that dogs are doing within the village, within even Page Park, damage to fences, damage to landscaping, damage to all of our parks. Talked with us about 4615 North Park with all plant material is gone now, she said, next to Page Park. She talked with us about the red house and the fact that sedge and hydrangeas that had been planted there are now dead, and that the grass that was planted is, for the most part, gone. From her perspective, the same problems existed at the village center. She referenced county code, which requires dogs to be on a leash, and referenced the fines that are associated with off-leash, and also talked about requirements to license and vaccinate pets. She basically was asking dog owners to be more respectful and was wondering whether there were things that the village could do. A second attendee at the meeting agreed with those comments and talked about the experience in New York City and some of the regulations and rules or expectations that have been adopted there. A second resident talked with us about the possibility of installing a plaque in Willoughby Park for a colleague who had passed away, and thought that in the future there might be others who would be interested in placing some kind of memorial on the stone surface at the park. So the committee decided on both issues to take a month and bring those issues back on the agenda of the Parks and Grounds Committee. So we have a meeting. Our future confirmed meeting is on February 13th, 6:15 p.m. Those items will come back on the agenda. In addition, we received an update similar to the update that the village manager presented on Page Park, on the architect, on the inspections, on the stormwater management plan. So here too, for those who are interested in staying up to date between council meetings on the status of Page Park, the Parks and Grounds Committee meetings are an opportunity to do that as well. We were informed about the trees that had been removed in Willoughby Park, 18 arborvitae trees, with the intent to replace those at the appropriate time with a different native, but probably shorter shrub. And we're told about the yews that had been replaced in Humphrey Park. By the time of the meeting, those yews had been replaced with native species consistent with thoughts that were under discussion at another committee. We also, at a previous meeting, as I mentioned, looked at signage that's used in other parts of the country for public parks, looked at a sample of what that signage might say, expectations that might be stated on the signage for residents and others who use the park, so that the expectations could be clear. And Councilman R., who's a member of the committee, agreed to take a look at the sample, draft something, and bring it back at this point to the February council meeting. As I mentioned, next meeting, February 13th, 6:15 p.m., and we're looking to have a confirmed meeting on March 17th at 6:15. We're waiting for one council member to confirm his availability. That's my report. Any questions from council members? If not, then moving on to the Finance Committee meeting of January 9th.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we had a Finance Committee meeting January 9th. We went over several items. First, we discussed the preliminary draft budget. I want to really emphasize it is a preliminary budget. It's based on, it will change as we get closer to the next fiscal year and as the council makes decisions in the coming months, such as Mayor White indicated, we don't have a final salary recommendation. For now, we are projecting an operating surplus of about $45,000. And this year, for the first time, the budget also includes estimates for capital expenses, something we've never done before. And when you factor in those costs, which include one-time and ongoing capital costs for Page Park and the Red House, we are projecting a deficit of more than $300,000. A lot of that may depend on how the big chunks of money we have to spend on the Red House and Page Park get allocated between this year and next year. So again, that's why it's still in flux, but this is why it's important to include capital expenses, and you can't just look at the operating expenses in a vacuum. And so we'll be talking more about that in the next month. We discussed several other items without voting. We discussed the property tax rate the council sets each year. I expressed my desire to continue the current rate of 4 cents per thousand. That is the lowest rate we are allowed to charge. We agreed as a committee to defer that decision until the budget is finalized. And that's typically what we do. I thought maybe we could get ahead of that, but the feeling was let's do that all together as we typically do. We also discussed the disposition of the $1 million we're expected to receive from the sale of the Red House air rights. As we talked about, hopefully in May, that's the deadline to receive it. We're scheduled to receive those. I said that. The council has already approved depositing 1/2 of that money, or $500,000, into the capital fund. I expressed a desire to put the entire amount into the capital fund, which would be the whole $1 million. The committee agreed to hold off a recommendation until the budget is finalized. The reason I recommended doing that is, again, we have really big chunks of money we're spending on the Red House, we're spending on Page Park. Once that's done, we will now have the additional ongoing costs to maintain those properties. And at some point, we are going to have to start spending substantial amounts of money on our roads. So if, and again, this is a projection, if we don't put any additional money in, we will substantially run down the capital fund by the end of 2028. So I'd like, since we do have funds, I'd like to sort of get ahead of that and put the entire balance into that. And then we had conversations, I'll just lump them into the broad category of cash management. I agreed to work with the village manager to produce a cash management policy. I feel the best way to start that is to have a narrative about what we do, just actually look at how we're handling our funds now, and then use that as a springboard for discussing what procedures we might want to modify. The next Finance Committee is confirmed for February 27th, so Mayor White, if hopefully we can maybe have something by then on, I know we're all busy, but February 27th, 6 p.m. here. As always, I encourage anyone to reach out to me if you want to share any concerns or discuss any items. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Councilman Measy.
I'd like you, Roy, to clarify a point. You indicated that when we use the capital, we cover the capital expenses for next year. You said the budget would be in deficit. Let's be clear, the operating budget will be in balance, or we'll have a surplus. The capital expenses which you talk about will come out of the capital improvements budget. So let's be clear, the operating budget will not be running a 300,000 or whatever you said deficit. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, well, we don't have final numbers. That's where we are today. But there was a conversation last month about, will we have a deficit or will we have a surplus? I said, it depends how you define it. So you're right. But if you're looking at cash we take in, less cash we spend, that will be a negative number. But yes, on an operating basis, right now we are projecting a surplus.
Any further questions? Yes.
I have a question on the anticipation of what you're projecting costs for different things, and you referred to the Red House as costing several different categories. But what is your projection of the cost for, if the committee has projected what the additional cost will be for Page Park? Or do you have a ballpark figure? Did you all discuss that?
Yes, the amount due to the contractor is, I think, about $190,000. We've decided to incur all the additional costs and then at the end, try to recoup some of those. But for now, we're laying out all the money. So it's 191,000. We know the stormwater study is 32,000. We know the architect is 3,000. The rails will almost certainly have cost overruns based on tariffs and the price of steel. So we estimated 250,000 to get the park open. And again, by the time we do the budget, we probably will have a better estimate. But we're going with 250,000.
So is that 250,000 plus the 190 plus the 32,
No,
or is
no,
that all?
it's 190 plus 60. But again, you know, we're more likely to have a surprise to the upside than a surprise to the downside.
I'm sorry, you said 190 plus?
We owe Green Sweep,
Uh-huh.
as the contract's written, less what we've paid them, about 100, I think 191,000? Yeah. So everything else is on top of that 191.
So you're anticipating an additional possible 250?
No, it's 191 plus an additional 59 to get to 250. And as I said, we already know about 35,000 that's been identified. So it's likely that number's going higher.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. That moves us on to the report from the Public Safety Committee.
Okay. First, I'd like to share just a little bit of history. The Public Safety Committee has only been around for a little while, and a little while being just a little over a year. And as a result, a lot of the things in the village, in fact, everything that was related and still is related to public safety, was always under the guise of the village manager and his assistant Jason. So Julian and Jason and Donna really have been seeing the safety issues and concerns of the village for years. The Public Safety Committee is another set of eyes, ideas, thoughts, suggestions, and we really work together. And I have to say, I appreciate all the work and the time that I have worked with Julian, Jason, and Donna in their recommendations and understanding what goes on in the village. We have looked at everything you can think of, from street crossings to painting to lights to everything that requires and things people think about as far as public safety issues and things that people don't think about regarding public safety issues in the village. And I just want to say thank you, because I think we have a really good team working together. The Public Safety Committee does not oversee contracts. We don't negotiate them. We don't make a expenditure for them. We sit and we talk together to understand what's needed, what new enhancements we could think of that go into the community, how much they cost. We do a lot of research and discussion on when can we do this, if this could work, do you think it's a good idea? And some of the projects that we're still working on are, we're still looking at cameras because of the drone program kicking in with Montgomery County Police Department. And we would not be able to have a drone in our village, but the drone that is to be in Bethesda will cover this area. We're looking at cameras on the outside on our streets and the businesses. We've enhanced the relationship with our business community with more conversations and sitting down and talking to them and understanding them more. Being a part of the Friendship Alliance, and as Councilman Pestronk talked earlier, working with Metro Police. This committee has opened more doors and helped to work with more people, all because of the work that has been laid out in the beginning by Julian and Jason. So I want to thank them a great deal. We are looking at some ideas on new signage and how we can find the right signage for the intersections in the streets. Because as many of you see them pancaked and flattened out, those cost, even though it's a small fee, that fee adds up after a while. And it's great to have those if you're in an environment that does not have a lot of trucks, buses, cars, and people who can't make real good turns. So we're looking at new ideas and trying to find something that would be suitable, and not just suitable, but aesthetically pleasing to the eyes, but also serves the purpose of what we want, and that is for people to be able to cross the street in the crosswalks and a sign not be knocked over. And so we're trying to research, and I know Julian and Jason have been looking all summer, even back from when we went to the MML conference, of getting ideas, and then they went to another conference and tried to find out ideas of what's going on in other locations in other cities and towns. So we are looking at that to see what we can come up with. And the lights have always been discussed, and they, if you attend the meetings, they are there. We are talking about them. And the last study that was done in 2022, which is why we have the lights we have now. It's not to say that we can't look at another option. It's just to let people know that the last light study was done in 2022, which brought us to the type of LED lights that we have now. And these are LED lights. So we've been talking about lights. We've been talking about different types of lights. We've been looking at that. It's not a inexpensive task. It is a very costly task on changing all the lights again. And looking at a different type of LED. Also looking at the type of bulb that the light bulbs are encompassed by, the casement for it. So it's not that we don't hear you, and Julian definitely does not hear you. He does hear you, and we are not just ignoring that. It's just that we're looking to try and find something that could be suitable, but also take into account the cost factor of changing it, because that, Julian will probably give you more information on, that was a pretty costly study that was done in 2022. Julian, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, and just to sort of clarify one point, it wasn't so much a study as a research of the viability of changing all the lights to LED bulbs, which it was then determined that could be done because the village has our own custom streetlight poles that had the previous bulbs, high pressure sodium, for many years, and it was unclear if LED bulbs would ever be able to fit in those fixtures until 2022, when it was determined that they could be retrofitted. So we actually saved some money by not having to replace fixtures, or it was a simple, relatively simple switch to place the LED bulbs inside the existing fixtures. So those were all updated in, I believe it was December of 2022, so just a little over 2 years ago. Thanks.
Okay, and the next Public Safety Committee meeting will be February 3rd, and hope to see everyone there.
Any questions for, yes?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a comment. We have put, and again, it's the draft budget, but I did add a $75,000 line item for security in each of the next 3 years. So there is an anticipation in case there is a decision to incur some additional security expenses.
Okay. There's also $180,000 that has been added to the draft budget with
extra? Or what is
yeah,
is that extra?
Well, I don't know what you mean by actually. We have a schedule of anticipated capital improvements, and there now is a line item in there for, that doesn't mean it's been spent or allocated or a decision's been made, but just in anticipation of a need, it's in there. In the capital improvements budget, there's a $190,000 item. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's I believe the agreement, yes. Village manager?
Two slightly different things. The finance committee just recently talked about adding, and in the preliminary draft budget, which has not even been presented to the council yet, $180,000 in the operating budget, which would be for police, off-duty police, potentially. And then, as Mr. Schaefer mentioned, $75,000 for capital improvement public safety expenses, which would cover, for instance, additional speed bumps, something like that. The speed bumps that we did this past year that was a capital improvements expense.
Okay.
Or potentially, as he mentioned, changing streetlights or changing streetlight fixtures, something like that. So that's
Okay. Thank you
it's
for,
sort of
I didn't understand what that meant. Yes,
it's
thank you.
intended to be just a general category for public safety capital improvement expenses, as opposed to the line item in the budget for police.
Oh,
Great, thanks for that
thanks.
clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Then that takes us into old business. The first item is a discussion and a vote on the New Initiatives Project, which is under tab 6. This is a draft which has benefited from considerable discussion in the Finance Committee originally, and then subsequently council members have seen it and shared comments with it. I've attempted in this draft to incorporate comments that I've received, and I would move approval of this document as the basis for the expenditure of funds which are in the 2025 budget for the New Initiatives Project. It's been a motion and support. Is there a discussion? Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so in the original draft, there was the way it was worded is that if you wanted to submit an idea, you also had to execute the entire idea. And my objection at the time was you had to become a vendor of the village and potentially lay out $4,000, which is not consistent with encouraging people to give ideas. You did, I believe, take that out. And I noticed it looks like from last month to this month, it came back in a slightly different form. And I'd just like to read on the first page where it says letters of interest, shall. Number 3 says, state whether the proposer wishes to implement the idea or whether one wishes to recommend another person or organization to implement the idea, which is fine. But then it says, if the latter, include a letter from that person or organization accepting the responsibility to perform the work or implement the idea, which means somebody who just has an idea now has to still go out and find the person or find the organization to do it and get them to agree in writing to do it with a budget. It's only one step removed from really requiring them to be a vendor. So I would like to, I guess, make a motion to modify number 3. So I'm offering an amendment. So my amendment, I have a copy if you'd like, to replace number 3 with as follows. State whether the proposer wishes to implement the idea. If not, the village staff will work to identify a vendor or organization that can perform the work and/or implement the idea at a cost not to exceed $4,000. And the reason is it will relieve somebody who just wants to present an idea for the burden of all this additional work.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question on the motion.
Yeah.
So, oh.
Right, we have to have a second for it.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Councilman R. seconds the motion by Councilman Schaefer.
Okay.
Keep doing this wrong.
And I would just say if
clarification. So it's, that's the amendment to the original motion, correct?
Yes, that's the,
That
that's
Roy
right.
initiated and Dan seconded,
So-
right?
That's correct.
Just to be, sorry, since I'm seconding it, I just want to make sure that I'm totally clear. So Roy's motion is to adopt this proposal with that edit. Is that correct?
Not necessarily adopt it,
Well,
Well, the
but
motion that's been-
you're amending Mr. Measy's motion to adopt the proposal by adding that change in language. So
Yes.
so the motion is to adopt the proposal with
Yes.
the edit you're suggesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, now, I'm sorry?
I mean, I'm not the parliamentarian, we don't have a parliamentarian, but one can offer an amendment to a motion, and if the amendment, even if the amendment is accepted or rejected, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily supporting the underlying motion.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
So I think in fairness to Roy, what he's saying here is that he's proposing an amendment. He can reserve to, if he wishes to say, if this amendment is accepted, I will support the entire thing, or he can say, I just like to vote on this amendment.
Yeah, I don't have any objection to that. I just wanted to make clear what we were discussing, so I appreciate that clarification.
Councilmember Tyler.
Okay, so I want to understand with the change. So you're saying that the person who brings the suggestion forward, their idea, you then turn it over to the village manager for the staff to go find a company or whatever, a vendor, to implement their idea. So far, is that what
Well,
you're
not
saying?
necessarily. So if it doesn't meet the other criteria, like it's not something we can do, they obviously don't need to go ahead and
That's-
find.
that's-
So I'm saying if it otherwise meets all the
All of that
requirements.
is above. I'm just saying, is that the process? that
Yes,
you're
which-
looking-
which is
Okay, so then the second part of that is, if they are responsible for looking to find a vendor, contractor to do this project, is the person who submitted the idea involved with them, or is the total responsibility on the village manager to make sure and interpret what the person decided they wanted to do is done correctly? Or is that person left out of it afterwards?
They can be involved, but they're not required to. I mean, this is called new initiatives. The preamble talks about soliciting ideas. So if that's what we're looking to do, that's what we should allow people to do and not place an additional burden on them as a sort of a penalty for giving a suggestion we like. And that's how it read, I believe, last month. Because I looked, and it looks like this piece was added.
Village Manager Mansfield.
If the village manager is being asked to research the potential viability of one of these, the village manager would appreciate the discretion to be able to go back to the person and potentially ask them
Of
for their
course.
ideas.
I'm not saying they're banned.
I just, yeah.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think that later in that section, which is on page 2, to the second paragraph up from proposal evaluation process, it says the village manager may contact one, none, or more than one person or organization to discuss the proposal in further detail and/or to solicit additional information in writing. So that concern is addressed. So are there any other questions or comments about, first, the amendment? Because the process will be that we'll vote on the amendment first. If that passes, then the next vote will be on the amended motion to adopt the new initiatives.
Unless there's
project
another
here,
amendment.
Unless there's another amendment, that's correct. Thank you. Yep.
Could you read the specific language one more time?
You want me to read it or you want? Okay. This replaces number 3.
Microphone.
Sorry, this will replace what's now written in number 3. State whether the proposer wishes to implement the idea. If not, the village staff will work to identify a vendor or organization that can perform the work and/or implement the idea at a cost not to exceed $4,000.
So one observation, that these are requirements, this whole section is requirements of the submitter. The way that second sentence is drafted, that presumes, that shifts a responsibility presumptively to the village manager. So I think
Yes.
that second language, that second sentence should reflect the intent of the submitter, not the outcome. So that is something to the effect that if not,
Sure.
whether the submitter would like the village, something to that effect.
Well, I copied the first part of the language.
Yeah,
So
state
do you
whether the
wanna see-
proposal wishes to implement the idea or rely on the village manager to ...
Okay. Would you want to mark it up the action?
Happy to do that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is it seems that feasibility and implementability, the ability of the village manager to find a performer should be a factor in whether we select a project. And so I don't think we can presume that we select a project without doing that work.
Yeah, okay, so Mayor White indicates that that was the change that she was going to make. So, Councilman Orr, can you quickly make that change? And
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilman Schaefer,
Yep.
you're,
Just give me
yes.
one-
Yeah,
just give me 1
Councilman
minute.
Schaefer, you're okay with changing the language?
Yeah, I just want to obviously take that burden off the submitter, and I'm fine changing the wording.
Great, okay. Councilman Measy, did you have a comment?
Again, I
Lean in.
think that's a fine amendment to the amendment. I think we have to keep in mind that none of this gets to the village manager or anybody like that until there's an approval of this project through the approval process here. We're getting the idea that, I don't want anybody to have the idea that all these suggestions will come flying in and they're all gonna go flying over to the village manager. We'll have to hire a second assistant village manager to handle all that. So let's remember that this is all the preliminary part of the thing.
Thank you. So,
Me or?
Council,
Does the dog do that?
yeah, that's right. Councilmember Salt, would you read the amended motion on the amended motion?
This is change to number 3, requirement under letters of intent to read. State whether the proposer wishes to implement the idea or request that the village staff work to identify a vendor or organization that that can perform the work and/or implement the idea at a cost not to exceed $4,000.
That's fine.
Perhaps it should also say, should the village manager not be able to identify such an individual or organization, that would be reported to the council, so that,
I think Mr. Measy's point was that the feasibility is a prerequisite to the proposal even being presented, right? It's one of the several factors that we would hope the council and other reviewers would take into consideration.
with that understanding and committee note, I'm fine leaving the language the way it is.
Okay.
So are there any further discussion on this amended motion? Does everybody understand what it is? Does anybody want the secretary to read this motion again? Then on the amendment that's been proposed by Councilmember Schaefer and seconded by Councilmember R, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those in favor, say no. The motion carries.
Could you please allow, I'm sorry, is this on? A voice vote, R?
Yes.
R, yes. Measy?
Yes.
Yes. Schaefer?
Yes.
Yes. Zoll? Yes. Tyler? Yes. White?
Yes.
Yes. Pestron?
Yes.
Yes.
Back to the original motion, which is to adopt the draft that's here with that amendment. Is there any discussion?
I think, just to be clear, it reads approve, or do you want to adopt?
Adopt.
Adopt.
Seeing none. Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
Since Joe Boucher is here, I thought maybe he could just briefly discuss how he anticipates the CAC role in reviewing these contracts. Would you mind?
Mr. Butcher?
Thank you.
So your question is, what role does the CAC play in the process?
Right, because obviously the CAC is given
Yeah.
a role.
So Bobby, or the chair, shared some thoughts with me back around Thanksgiving, I guess. And we agreed to take it to the advisory committee to see if they would be interested. The advisory committee, and just so the public's aware, is not a decision-making body. All it can do is, take in requests, review things, and then bring them back, and make suggestions to the council. So the thought was to relieve the council of the burden of going through these things, to have, excuse me, the submissions come through the advisory committee. At that point, the advisory committee may choose to accept some, reject some, or call in a requester to have some more conversation to make sure that it's vetted. You could see the committee kind of, if there's 10 ideas, maybe rank ordering them and saying, we think these top 3 have some viability, and then bringing it back. Obviously, it's just not to say, hey, here's a top 3. Here's the top 3 and the reasons why.
In fact, the draft that the council is considering now has that ranking
Okay.
As part of the
Okay.
committee's process.
Great, perfect.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions?
Maybe,
Councilman Art?
in light of that, if I could make propose one more amendment. And I'm open to some discussion here, but based on the way that was described, I wonder if striking Community Advisory Committee from the criteria subheading, since it's the council who will determine whether an award would be made, perhaps reference to the CAC in that section is inappropriate.
No, not yet.
No.
So let me just speak.
I would help it would have helped me to have a markup of what you're suggesting.
So let me, Councilman R, if I may. The intention here, at the suggestion of another council member on several occasions, was to lay out the criteria that the CAC would use in order to, at least some of the criteria with points, so that it would be, the evaluation criteria would be clear. And given that these are the evaluation criteria that the Community Advisory Committee would use, it seemed to me in drafting this language that it would be incumbent to have the council examine these criteria, but as it says in the proposal, the council is free to do whatever it wants with the material that comes from the Community Advisory Committee to approve some or none or all of them within the constraints of the budget.
So then would it be more appropriate to strike the village council from that section and determine whether any award would be made to something more reflecting the advisory nature of the CAC's inputs?
I think under award information section, it says the council at its sole discretion shall determine how funds will be dispersed, and that council make no awards or award no more than $4,000 to one or more entities. So that is how I thought that was being addressed, but
Yeah, I guess and I hadn't really thought about it when I read it, but just hearing the way the CAC is thinking about this, that sort of emphasis on the advisory nature of the CAC, that determine whether any award will be made, seems to suggest that, and the association of that language with the CAC seems to suggest that they're playing more of a decision-making role than an advisory role. So that's the piece of it I'm trying to. I think the award information language is fine. I think the idea of giving the CAC some guardrails to their analysis is also fine. But suggesting that the CAC will review these to determine whether an award will be made is where I'm struggling a little bit based on what we've just heard. So perhaps criteria to be used by the CAC in making their recommendations and village council to determine whether an award will be made, to distinguish the two roles, the CAC's role and the council's role.
okay. So
I'm
you
sorry,
make-
I'm gonna need the
Yeah,
language
well,
that
yeah,
somebody passes to me.
absolutely.
Are
please.
you making that in the form of a motion to amend the
Sure.
original motion?
Yep, so,
Okay.
move to change the the first sentence of the criteria section on page 2 to insert, when making recommendations between Community Advisory Committee and end.
Could you say it louder, please? Between Community Advisory Committee.
Yeah, let me just ask a question, let me
Okay.
let Council Member Measy ask a question
Mayor,
first.
You know, Dan, I'm sort of persuaded by your earlier point. I think the village council should be removed from this sentence because it's really contradicted. If the village council decides that we don't want to do this particular project, and yet we're bound by this, then people will just say, well, look, we met all these criteria, we did all these things. So I think this should be guidelines for the CAC, and the village council is covered in the next section where we say the village council is free to do what it wants to do.
I'm comfortable with that, and so then my motion would be to amend the first section of the criteria section
Just take end village council.
and village council, and then to make recommendations. So strike from end village council to the end of the sentence, and insert to make recommendations, or to inform recommendations, I think, perhaps.
Inform means it's sort of optional, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm fine with make. I don't know, I don't think that inform suggests that it's optional, because I don't think these are exclusive, but I'm fine with to make.
Let me speak to this as well, because as this draft was being developed, as this final was being developed, there was one council member who felt strongly that there should be criteria used by the village council. I'm fine with the amendment as it stands to make this discussion and recommendations by the Community Advisory Committee. So if nobody else has any problems with it, I don't. And is there support for Council Member R's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, great. So we've got a motion, the language, Secretary Salt, do you have it or do you need it?
No, you were good. I was expecting it to be passed over, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Hold on one second.
If you're not going to do the dog, I'll do it.
Thank you, Michael.
So does everybody understand the motion that was made, or would you like the secretary to read the amended motion? Read it? Okay, please read the amended motion.
I'm going to first read the insert and delete, and then I'm going to read it as it would be final, okay? The first sentence under criteria to be used by the Community Advisory Committee, insert to make recommendations are, delete, and village council to determine whether any award will be made. So if accepted, it will read, the first sentence will be criteria to be used by the Community Advisory Committee to make recommendations are, colon.
Is that your
Is
motion?
that what you intended?
Correct, yes.
Okay, any further questions? This has been a motion by Councilmember R, supported by Councilmember Tyler, as just read. Any further comment? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You'd like to call the roll?
Yes, please. R?
Yes.
For Measy?
Yes.
For Schaefer?
Yes.
For Solt? For Tyler? For White?
Yes.
For Pestrunk?
Yes.
4.
Motion carries 7-0. Are there any further amendments that anyone would like to propose? Seeing none, the motion that's on the table is the draft with the 2 amendments that have been adopted.
Wait a minute, did we vote on the first amendment?
Yes,
Oh, yes,
we did.
yes, I have it here, sorry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we are now, again, on the original motion with the 2 amendments that have been adopted. It's been moved. It was moved by me and supported by Councilmember Measy. Any further questions on that? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, would
Opposed.
you like to call a roll?
Yes. R?
Yes.
R, 4, Measy?
Yes.
Measy, 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer, 4, Salt? Against, Tyler? 4, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Tyler, 4, White?
Yes.
White, 4, Pestrunk?
Yes.
Pestrunk, 4.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Who was one?
I was the one.
You're the one? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your vote. 6-1. Thank you for the correction. That moves us on to discussion vote on changes to the village bylaws.
Chairman, can I
Yes.
say something? I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. It's 9:19. We've got a huge amount to do. My fever is not going down. I propose to put all these remaining items off to the next meeting. I don't know if anybody agrees.
Well, let me make a suggestion. I'm not sure that some of these are going to take an extended amount of time. Let me discuss what is intended here under the changes to what I would intend under the village bylaws. At the last meeting, these changes were formally proposed, and according to the bylaws, any of them could be adopted at this meeting, if in fact that's the pleasure of the council. My feeling about this is that we could do that. We could look through this, and it was to look at the simple, as I characterize them, the simple changes. I think we could still do that, to examine each of the simple changes one by one, if that were the preference of the council. We could also, and it has been suggested, ask the mayor to convene a separate meeting of the council to examine the simple bylaws or all of the bylaws and to decide how the council wished to act on this. So unless, let me see what the council's preference about this would be. Yes, Councilman Measy.
Well, I think there are 2 things here which, according to the email traffic and whatever, there are 2 obvious changes which which we can easily make. The removal of hills from the title of the village, in the title part of the thing, and the removal of posting things on a bulletin board, which doesn't exist anymore. This is number 1 and number 10. I think there are a few others that are similarly easy, but just to give us a sense of moving forward, when we keep postponing things, I would move that we adopt Amendments 1 and Amendments 10 as recorded in the document to the bylaws.
Is there support for that motion?
I'm sorry, I made a motion to adjourn, and you were explaining around it. I think I get to have that motion disposed of in one way or another. Isn't that correct?
Okay, there's been a motion, there's been a move to adjourn the meeting
And postpone these items.
and
to
postpone these items to a subsequent meeting. Okay. Is there discussion?
I don't think that's a debatable motion. I don't think it's debatable. You have to just vote on it.
The alternative, I suppose, well, since we don't have a parliamentarian.
You had a motion, it was presented, it was seconded, you asked for discussion. If there is no discussion, then you take the vote. The question is whether it's being discussed or whether it's debatable.
Could you, I couldn't hear you, Dan, could you repeat what you said? Okay.
So, I have, I think, the discretion of the chair not to recognize the motion.
No, 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 no. If
Yeah.
that's the case, I challenge the decision of the chairman.
Okay.
We can,
Huh?
Table the motion, no discussion to table.
Well, then we table, if that fails, we vote on the motion. What's the point?
Yeah.
If,
Yes, yes, Councilwoman Tyler.
it is a motion, it is a second. You move it along just like any other motion. If there is a discussion, then there is a discussion. If there is no discussion, then you move it along and you vote. Now, what
Otherwise,
can come behind that is when do you want to reconvene? Councilman Salt has given a rationale as to why.
and if you don't recognize it, that means you can fail to recognize any motion anyone makes.
Let's not go down the
Well,
spiral.
but that's what it
Let's
means.
deal with the motion
Okay.
that is on the floor, and let's either move it along in the proper parliamentary procedure, which is now you have a motion that was second, and you either voted up, voted down, you have a discussion. If there is no discussion, then you vote on it.
I am going to call the question on adjourning the meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Would you like to, I oppose. Would you like to call the roll?
Yes, I would. R,
Yes.
for, Measy,
no.
Measy against, Schaefer,
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Sold 4, Tyler,
Yes.
Tyler 4, White,
Yes.
White 4, Pestrunk,
No.
Pestrunk against.
Case closed.
So the count is 2-6,
1, 2, 3, 4,
2-5,
5 to
sorry,
2.
2-5.
In
to 2.
favor of adjournment.
Right. This meeting of the Village of Friendship Heights Council is adjourned.
There you go.
Thank you.